Hi, I'm Suzanne Titkemeyer. Used to write for Pathos, a column called No Longer Quivering. I wrote that for almost 10 years. I wrote before that for a year or so. So I guess I could say over 10 years. Um, Everything and his brother has conspired to prevent me from this today. We've had the pool guys come to work on the hot tub, which is suddenly out, and there's been some confusion back and forth. Who's paying what? Anyway, big thing. And yesterday evening, if you saw my video, you knew darn good and well that I was peeved last night. I don't like to make videos in response to somebody else when I'm pissed off because I tend to be a lot meaner than I normally would be. A lady named PJ made a video where she was talking about Natalie's video and pretty much straight up accused some of my friends of some stuff that I know they damn well didn't do. And I just reacted out of that. And I have to say before I start, Nat and others have confused me and Sue M and kept saying we're the same people. If you go look at Sue M's wonderful ranting at the door videos, and you could hear that I have a Southern accent and she has an Australian accent, we are not the same person, not at all. So there you go. And I wonder why people are popping out of this. They not seeing, not able to see the stream, or I'm buffering. I can't really tell from here. So let's get back. Let's get back to and ignore just all the stupid ass drama and just go on with our Jim Bob Duggar guidelines. Well, supposedly Jim Bob Duggar. I've been given this and told that it is the pre-courtship questionnaire the guys have to fill out before they're allowed to date a Duggar daughter. The questions seem to be skewed towards a man answering to try and become courtship with a woman. But I don't know if this is the same thing that he gives the girls that are trying to join the family or what. But it's a whole pile of toxic nonsense. And I'm really surprised that none of the guys, at least, would say, this is really none of your business. Hey, small town Jewel, having a good day so far? Just a confusing one, running around trying to talk to the guys that are repairing this, and the guys that come in and repairing that, paying this guy. It's just been Tico madness this morning already. And I just saw one of them go into my guest house. Oh, well. So we're going to look at this silly stuff having to do with Jim Bob Duggar. I'm going to ignore all the nonsense and just go on. Are you generous with what God has given you? To what degree? Now we're talking about money here. Yet again, he keeps circling back to same things. And some of these questions are asked so many different times in so many different ways that it almost seems like, when you were in high school and your math teacher or your science teacher tried to screw you up by asking you the same questions all the time. Hey, Bliss, to try and trip you up, ask you the same question three different ways in the same quiz, trying to get you to say 3 different answers or even just 2 so you can say you don't understand the concept, go back and study it some more. It just seems that way to me because this is just some really ridiculous, man. Do you tithe? What percentage of tithe do you give? Well, that's interesting considering that for a lot of the years, Jim Bob Duggar went to the Church of the Holy Basement, his own self-church with a few other people. I'd like to turn that on him and say, how much do you tithe? And I'm also going to throw an interesting factoid out. I know this from my years at church. I know this from having been on the team repeatedly to count the money. Very few people any longer in evangelical churches tithe at all. So you're getting money from a handful of people. The sad thing is a lot of times those are the very people that try to run everything. And you're like, no. How long have you tithed? Do your parents tithe? Do you give above your tithe? How much generally do you give above the tithe? That is a whole lot of questions about a tithe from a guy who runs the Church of the Holy Basement most of the time and has only recently started to go to an IFB church. Do you give on occasion to other needs that you hear about above your regular giving? For example, if a missionary with a need came by, would you give additionally to a need that might have been heard, or do you think you've already given to him because of giving to missions already? Giving to missions and missionaries is a big thing in Quiverful culture. It's something that we were all encouraged to do. We were all encouraged to go on mission trips. Most of us had been on mission trips. We were encouraged to give freely to mission trips. Tithe, Tithe. It's a word that means give to the church. The Bible says 10%, but I've seen it floating around up and down all over the place when it comes to tithing. I've heard some good, committed, quiverful Christians that argue that God did not mean for us to tithe the 10% when he said that. Yeah, I've heard people say that that's, so it just really depends. It depends upon what flavor of the Kool-Aid you're drinking and seeing. Our last church dissolved into a flood of stupid once the tithing dropped. Once the pastor had run off anybody with a regular job and money who was tithing, things got bad. He sent a letter around. They had a tithing meeting. It was bad. Yeah. Offering. It's the same thing, but that's a word. It got to the point where the pastor speculated on everybody in the church who was still there on their income and what he thought they should tithe. There was a meeting. It did not go well. I was already long gone by that point, but I heard about it and I just kind of laughed and said, yeah, that's about how I think it would go. That's why you don't run off your big tithers, why you don't let them run the church either. Okay. Are you ever stirred emotionally to give? Well, I would hope all of us would be stirred emotionally to give where you see it's really needed. Because there are just going to be those times too where you're going to have to give without any kind of notion of any kind of anything. Oh goodness. And I see the dude who is doing the repair on they're out there. This is supposed to be set up so this did not disturb me at all. Okay, let's see what happens next. Okay, communication. How do you handle arguments? That's actually one of those things that you should decide during pre-marriage counseling, and hopefully you know the person well enough to know what's going on when you argue and it's not a knockdown drag out with fists thrown. Would you be willing to go to communications classes? Again, too early to be asking that. In your family, how are differences settled? Is your family accustomed to teasing? I almost thought it said leasing for a minute. I was like, leasing? Why would leasing be, what are they doing out there? Why would leasing be a thing? But it is teasing. To what degree do you take teasing? Do you know when to tease and when not to? Are you willing to change your limitations on teasing to suit my upbringing? Oh my goodness. Teasing? Really? What are we? Like in the fifth grade and you're pulling somebody's hair and putting it in the inkwell to just piss somebody off, and here comes the guy with the receipt. I hope he just lays it on my husband's desk. I'm not going to get up. I don't deal with these guys. My husband does. Okay, so we're back. So that's a weird section on teasing. I don't know what the heck that is even meaning about. That's definitely not anything we covered in any part of my premarital classes or any of that. Can you tell me no, or will you let me walk all over you? Oh my. And just like that, we're done with that last section, which is money, 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 money again. Money followed by communication. That's not much on communication. Anger. What upsets you? How long does it take you to get angry after something upsets you? Hopefully they have a shorter fuse than I do. I tag my friends, I tag my family, and my fuse just goes off. Do you have a short fuse? How would you respond if someone to tell you that you are angry? How angry do you get? Do you hold your anger in? Do you hold your anger in until you cannot stand it and then you let it all out at once? Yeah, these are all the sort of things that you should already know. If you were like a normal person, if you were like a normal person and you dated and you got to see somebody in all circumstances, you got to see them over a long course of time, that question wouldn't even be out there. That question would just be dealt with because you would see damn good and well how somebody deals with their anger and whether they explode or not. Now, my husband has a tendency to explode, especially as technology. And you know what I do? You know what my responsibility to his anger is? Nothing, de nada, zip. I just say, oh, really? If I say anything at all. But most of the time, I just let him rant and fume over why his iPhone doesn't work by himself. He has a tendency to grab his iPhone and do like this when he's trying to answer it. And that doesn't work for his iPhone. It immediately locks the screen when he does it. I've tried to talk to him about it. No dice. That's his problem. That's what I think one of the things I had a hard time learning when I got married is I am not responsible for his anger. I'm not responsible for his responses. I could just sit off to the side and do like Spock and go, fascinating. Okay. How angry do you get? More anger questions that are repeat. Oh, here comes the super toxic. Have you ever had such an angry outburst that you threw something, hit someone, hit something, or hit someone? Okay, for somebody to do that, for somebody to even admit it in a little survey is a huge red flag. You don't want somebody who's going to throw things, have a tantrum like a child, hit you, hit the wall. If they start hitting the wall, you're just going to have a whole lot of cracked wallboard around your house. This is a giant red flag question. But again, this is one of those things that if you actually got to know the person for 2 or 3 years before you married them, you'd have an answer. And we wouldn't have to do all these dumb little surveys. How do you react when something upsets you? They asked this question already. When someone upsets you, do you write that person off and never speak to them again? Or do you go to them and try to work out the problem? Well, that second one is the adult thing to do. Not easy to do, but the adult thing to do. I know I'm notorious for not doing that, just writing the person off. My husband's the opposite on that, so that's good. We balance each other out. Changing. Okay, before I'm going to start this, I'm going to say the nature of marriage has changed. The nature of life has changed. Nothing stays the same. Everything changes. That's just reality. That is a reality of life. The sooner you accept that and you realize that change is not necessarily evil, change is sometimes the thing that needs to happen to get you from point A to point B and get you there in one piece. Are you accepting of truth, new truth that you want to hear? Maybe he means than there. Are you accepting of truth, new truth, that you don't want to hear? I would guess that's what that would mean, whether it be from the pulpit, from a book, or from a counselor. Seems to me that's just a very badly worded question. Does God have to knock you over the head before you will change something in your life? Hopefully not. Are you hard-headed? Well, I'm guessing if God has to knock you over the head, you're pretty damn hard-headed. Are you teachable? I don't know what that means in the context of the man, except maybe you could let Jim Bob tell you what to do. But I know under the women's theology and teaching, being teachable means being very open, unusually so, and having no ego, no knees, no nothing, just being this empty vessel that's smiling and lives to serve. How would your family answer these questions about you? Can you give me an example of the last time you recognized an area you needed to change in your life? How long did it take you to change? How long ago was this? How long has it been since the time before that? Again, this is all TMI. He doesn't need to know all this quickly. I would like to see somebody tell him to take this survey and shove it. I ain't courting your daughter no more. How often do you take someone else's advice? How often do you go to the altar? Is your heart tender towards God, his ways, and new truth? How often do you feel conviction in your life? How long does it take you to deal with a problem once you recognize it? Does another person you've had a problem with have to apologize first, or do you go to them? Again, these are starting to be repeats of the same thing they asked earlier. Do you try to communicate and work things out with that person? Again, a repeat. How often do you follow through on what you have said you will do on a scale of 1 to 10? Very important, but again, something you might ask in marriage counseling, or you might know if you actually just talk to the person. Health. Okay, here we go. Do you suffer from any chronic disease or condition? Are you willing to have a physical exam by a physician before marriage? Whoa, whoa, whoa. That is going way too far. Okay. Jim Bob nor the new bride can demand that. Neither one of them can. That's just going too far. It's none of their business whether you'll take it physical or not. What is your understanding of proper health and nutrition? Holy fat shaming, Batman. This is what that is geared towards. How do you support your own health and nutrition? How do you stay skinny? Well, they didn't ask that, but I'm sure that's where all of these last two questions are going. Because even though the IFB has some of the fattest human beings I've ever laid eyes on, and I'm saying this as somebody who's not thin, who's fluffy and fat herself, I don't judge other people's weight, whether they're underweight or overweight. It's really their business. That is strictly their business. How they got there can be their business. I can tell you something. A lot of my weight came when I was on steroids for years for asthma, and I have not been able to take it down since, now that I've passed middle age. When you're taking steroids, high dose steroids like they're M&Ms, you're going to gain weight and it's going to stay with you. So why did I say that? Because I want to point out there's any number of reasons why people are underweight or overweight. It could be a medical condition. It could be the medication they're on. It could be family genes. I know people that eat almost nothing and they're large, and people that eat huge meals that are super skinny. It just seems to be the genetic hand of cards we're dealt. There's so many different factors that I don't like to look at anybody and say, well, you're too fat, you're too skinny. That's really not for me to say. That's really for them to say what they think about it. But I don't judge. And I don't think that the Duggars should judge. And I think that that is a backwards way to judge those two questions. Okay, we're going to holidays next. And we're getting closer to the end of this stupid thing. Do you celebrate holidays? If not, why not? Which holidays? Christmas, presents, trees, light Santa, Easter, Easter bunny, egg hunt. Wait, there's way more to Easter than that. 4th of July, fireworks. Of course, they went with that. And we just had 4th of July. And here, no fireworks for 4th, and I'm happy. I'm upset enough with them having fireworks on New Year's Eve here. because they make my poor kittens crazy. New Year's Eve, I guess. Wait a minute. New Year's? It doesn't say New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. Halloween? Costumes. And we all know that costumes are the gateway drug to homosexuality in that world. Valentine's Day. Holiday decorations. What do you want to know if somebody uses holiday decorations or they approve of them or what? Because I can't really tell from the two-word question. How do you celebrate holidays? Now, wait a minute. Didn't we just cover this? Were holidays a big deal to you growing up? What type of holidays? What's a typical holiday when you were growing up? I guess that Jim Bob is afraid that if you celebrated holidays as a kid, that they would want to know about that because they would think you would bring that tradition into your family. And people do bring all kinds of traditions. I used to go for over-the-top celebrations. And then during my quiverful years, I realized that I was really just stressing myself out a lot of times over those holidays. So I celebrate low key now compared to how I used to celebrate. But it's really all a matter of what you're used to. My husband, his family never did much for holidays. They didn't celebrate much. He never did. And that's fine. All of it's fine. If you go over the top and you turn your house into Santa's workshop or a Halloween graveyard, whatever, it's all fine. It's what you want to do. I'm just sick to death of religious people trying to make everything a sin. Everything is not a sin, and there's no one right way to live, regardless of what you guys think. It's what each person, it's where each person, where they line up. And that's really genuinely okay. Were holidays, okay, were holidays a big deal. And what was a typical holiday? Birthdays. Why do they have a separate section for birthdays? I guess because in the eyes of the world, the way they view the world, their twisted version of the world, they think that all of us are having these huge over-the-top celebrations for birthdays. You know, my birthday was, I went to my favorite jewelry store and picked out an inexpensive piece, and we got burgers. And I was fine with that. I was absolutely 100% fine with that. And I've had over-the-top birthdays too, and I was fine with that. Again, this is one of those personal preference things. It does not have a damn thing to do with religion that they're going to extrapolate out and pretend it does. Okay. Do you think you should give birthday presents? The next question is decorations. Decorations for your birthday. It's your birthday. Cake with a question mark. Okay, what's the deal with that? Why would they even throw shade at cake? Presents can be problematic if you don't have the money. They're not necessary, but at the same time, they're fun. They're nice and fun. So I guess they're setting up for an expectation that you just don't do these things that everybody else does because they're of the world and you're not of the world. I know they've shown big birthday parties on the show. That's a recent development. That's not something they started out with back when this survey was written, this little questionnaire. I think they probably do ask women to be checked out before marriage, that they ask everybody to undergo a physical, would be my guess. Some states require a physical before marriage, before they'll issue the marriage license. Which ones those are anymore, I don't know. But I remember when I got married back in the Mesozoic era, we had to get blood work done, and they asked us just general health questions. We had to prove we didn't have an STD before they let us get married. True story. I had a girlfriend who I absolutely loved, and I had to end my friendship with her In my 50s, when it became obvious she and I were on totally different paths in our lives, she went to get married to this cop. None of us liked this cop when she was in her 20s. And we only thought he was a jerk and he was probably cheating and everything else. And she took the blood work to get married in our state, and she had an STD. They wouldn't let her get married. They wouldn't give her the marriage license until she'd undergone the course of antibiotics. And knowing her, the cop gave it to her. They divorced many years later after many affairs by the police officer. And this is why you need to listen to your friends. If your friends tell you, hey, that guy's a creep, there's usually a reason for that. You usually have to stop and say, yes, that guy, I got to look at him a little further instead of being so blindly in love that you're getting married come hell, high water, or gonorrhea. Okay. Our birthday's a big deal. Or can you take them or leave them? Now, wait a minute. Didn't we just ask that question about birthday presents, decorations, and cake? And we've seen them having these huge birthday celebrations on the show. How about in regard to future children? Are birthday parties okay? Ding! You know, that is the wonderful thing about children. They do not require these big, over the top birthday parties. Usually, you can make some fairy bread and cupcakes and punch and have a few of them over to do a few little games like pin the tail of a donkey. And everybody is happy with that, especially the younger they are. I mean, I don't see the need for having these huge over the top extravaganzas when they're too little to even really appreciate it. So I'm not even sure what this is doing on the list. It's just crazy making. Okay, now we go to TV. Oh my goodness, that sin box in people's houses. What is your view of having cable TV in your home? Oh my gosh, you might see HBO and see a boob, particularly if you're watching Game of Thrones. You might see frontal male nudity on Game of Thrones. I seem to remember Hodor. Why am I having problems with words today? Hodor running around pantsless at one point. I remember that. That might be a corrupting influence in their eyes. What is your view about watching movies in general? Why didn't they move that to movies instead of TV? Because movies and TV can be distinctly different things. Even though I gotta say, in the world of post-beer virus, most movies are now being released in TV format first. And here they haven't reopened the movie theaters. I don't know if they're reopened in the States, but what is your view of renting movies? Do you go to the movies? There's a lot of questions about movies. If not, why? How do you respond when you see a girl that isn't dressed right? Oh my goodness, we're going back to Nike Town. If you know the Duggars well, you know that anytime they encounter a woman that's dressed not well, not what they would consider well, that might consist of showing a knee or an elbow or having a V-necked blouse on, that the Duggars would yell, one of the girls would say, Nike, and all the guys in the family would look at their shoes until that wicked wanton harlot had passed from view. It's actually kind of quaint that they can't be exposed to any of that. This is what drives the kind of problems that Josh Duggar is having. This whole modesty, R word culture. It makes men into the R word. It does all kinds of strange things to their brain if they're not even allowed to express a normal sexuality as teenagers when they're developing. If they have no outlet, that's what turns all of this in. Would you describe for me what you think is wrong or what bothers you about a lewdly dressed woman? I swear, if I wasn't so old and I was in another rock band, it would be lewdly dressed woman would be would be one of the names I'd have to consider. What is a lewdly dressed woman? I think that is a sliding scale depending upon who you are. I mean, I live in a place where people routinely wear thong bikini bottoms. All the time I see that. One time, it was really funny. We had a Lori Alexander rant about women in thong bikini bottoms and G-strings, whatever you want to call them. And she was talking about how she kept wanting to go up behind each one of those little girls with their thongs on and spank them with a wooden paddle because they were causing her husband to look. And I talked to my husband about this for quite some time. That was a weird noise. Oh, my yarn fund. Thank you so much, Nitwit. Thank you. I'm going to the States soon. I'm going to spend it all. I'm going to spend every penny. So back to Lori Alexander and the spanking and the thongs. We were on the beach in Tamarindo later that same day, and a very nice looking young lady ran past us with her surfboard, dropped her surfboard not 20 feet from us, and bent over to start doing the stretches you have to do. Well, you don't have to do them to surf, but if you're going to surf right and you're going to be limber enough when you get out there, you really need to go through the whole series of motions, everything from windmilling your arms to bending over to doing these squat jumps where you go from squat to jump it upright. Those exercises make surfing 50 trillion times easier. So anyway, she's doing the one where you're 100% bent over, touching your toes right in front of my husband. And I just busted out laughing, and I told him, I said, "Are you lusting over that?" And he just busted out laughing because we don't have those kind of problems. We don't yell Nike. We treat each other like we're adult enough. So I am guessing that if Jim Bob Duggar was on the beach and saw that, it would be kapow. It would be kapow, mind blown. It would be like, this does not compute. Well, that would be my guess. So, lowly dressed woman. That, like I said, that's all on the eye of the beholder. Would you have a curse-free unit? What the heck is a curse-free unit? You know, I'm going to have to Google that. Does cursing in a movie bother you? I wonder if that's something you attach to your TV that bleeps out all curse words. That would be interesting. Would you set a time limit for TV watching? I don't like that idea because there are going to be some times in your life where TV is going to be a blessing. You're going to be sick or whatever, and you're laying up in the bed and you can't think straight, and you watch endless episodes of Dr. Phil or Walker, Texas Ranger, or whatever it is that floats your boat. And not all of it is going to be curse words and thongs. Even though if you watch HBO, you're going to see some of that. With him laughing, does that mean he could care less? Yes. We had a conversation about that right afterwards. He could care less. He could care less. It's a constant parade of thongs on the beach. There's been times when I've said, look at her. She's really, really, really beautiful. So they have a problem with people watching TV, but they make a TV show. Yes, it's the most hypocritical thing in the world. And I'm sorry, I am watching the motmots outside. They're just outside my window, and they're moving around. They're very beautiful birds. I encourage you to look those up. They are the ones we have here are turquoise blue, and they just catch my eye every time they zoom past. They're very shy little birds. So when I see them, I always smile and say, yeah, it's glad to see you. So they have a problem with any slight nudity. They have a television program, yet they think television is some kind of evil portal to beaming nudity and dirty words into your brain, and you're going to pick up those dirty words. Okay. So I'm guessing that's what the curse-free unit is. What type of cartoons are okay for future children? I'm guessing SpongeBob SquarePants would be too much. Many, many years ago when I was in college, I had a girlfriend whose parents were fundamentalists, And I just got the biggest laugh out of them. I used to like to go around their house and listen to them rant about stupid things. And I think the thing that stuck with me the hardest that I laughed over was they wouldn't let her little brother watch the Smurfs, those innocent blue little guys from Belgium. Why? They said because it was an example of group homosexual living, which I thought was had to be the dumbest interpretation on the Smurfs I've ever seen. And I think they had one female Smurf, so it's not like it was group homosexual living. It was group men living with one woman. So, and it's fantasy. It's not trying to invoke the homosexual agenda as they understand it. So here we are with cartoons. Are you open to us making those decisions together? Girlfriend, don't marry anybody who is not open to your input and making decisions equally with you. Games. Oh my goodness. I know that the Duggars don't like card playing because a lot of the Baptist world does not. They don't like cards. Hey, Gam Gam, they don't like cards. Cards are like insane. They think that I guess because of the link with fortune telling and with tarot cards once upon a time, people just use the regular cards for that. Go figure. I don't know on that. Only thing I can think of. And do you play games? Do you have any problem with the following? Board games, dice, playing cards, but not gambling. Video games or watching sports. Okay, so here they are. They're by a roundabout way dissing and dismissing cards, dice, and video games. Which is kind of funny because since the pandemic, we've probably played more games. I've seen more game playing going on, and there's nothing wrong with any of it. Saying, let us decide together is basically saying, I will decide on what cartoon your children can see. That's true. And I'm sure poor old SpongeBob is off limits, along with the Smurfs and God knows what else. I haven't kept up with the cartoons recently. I don't know who is doing what. And suddenly we're in the video game section. Video games and watching sports. Do you own or play video games? Well, almost everybody does. Even I do sometimes. Video games are pretty ubiquitous. We have them now on our cell phones. I don't know about you guys, but if I'm stuck in a parking lot waiting for my husband for 20 minutes because I know he reacts and rants to people he meets, he talks to his friends a long time, out comes the cell phone, and I start playing Candy Crush like a fiend, like an addicted fiend. Yet I can go days and days and days without playing Candy Crush, without being addicted, without having any kind of withdrawal. Okay. Do you play video games in moderation? None at all. What happens when someone talks to you or comes in the room while you're watching a movie or playing a video game? I would hope that they would be adult enough to pause the game if it's possible, because some games are not, or the movie, and actually do the face-to-face interaction with you. I sometimes have to get on my husband if he's watching YouTube, and I walk in and start talking about something. Sometimes he pauses, sometimes he says, wait a minute. It just really depends, and it depends upon how important it is, whether I say, hey now. Things I like. Okay, this is the quiz section where they're going to quiz the guy in the pre-courtship who's not spent much time with you or met you even, because I'm not sure they have on all of these guys. This is the pop quiz, the real pop quiz. Favorite color, favorite foods, desserts, snacks, fast food, home cooking. And just like that, we're out. And I gotta say, that is the most pitiful list of bona fides I've ever seen as far as asking what they know about you. And the funny thing is all those things can change. I've said again and again and again, change is inevitable in life. It just happens. And we can either be graceful and go with it, or we can fight it, kick, and be dragged into it, kicking and screaming. And that's just how marriage is. And this document scares me because it does reveal a lot of the more sinister beliefs of Jim Bob Duggar. It shows that he plans on extending his influence, his everything over the family. He thinks he's going to be a family patriarch, telling everybody what to do. And he has to a certain extent, because there's been rumors come out that that is how he controls his adult children, is by money. He makes them toe the line by being very monetary about it, by what he'll pay for, what he won't pay for, rejecting the whole 9 yards. Now, I think poor Derek Dillard got the raw deal because he was the first. He was the first Duggar in-law, and he probably filled out that entire stupid form. I heard that Ginger's husband returned the form to Jim Bob with over 100 pages. So he was clearly trying to grease the wheels to get where he wanted to go. You know, anyone can lie on a document. That's the other thing I want to point out. You can lie. You can lie your biscuits off on those forms and fool Jim Bob. It wouldn't be that hard, because Jim Bob's not the most sophisticated man on the planet. I think it would be pretty easy to get one over on him. Not saying that any of the males that have married the Duggar daughters have done that. Nope, not saying that at all. I'm just saying it would be easy if you took it in your mind to do so, and your main goal was to marry one of them. It would be so easy to go there and fool the crap out of him in his controlling ways. But going back to Derek, since Derek was the first, Derek likely has gotten the worst short end of the deal. I mean, he's spoken out about it on his Twitter page. I actually follow him there and see what he has to say. I'm curious about it, especially since he's talked about writing a tell-all book 2 or 3 times. He has busted that Jim Bob controls everybody using money. He's exposed a lot of really interesting things that I thought were going on behind the scenes, but I could never prove. He has come out and said that's exactly what's going on. That's exactly. So Jill and Derek are not done yet. They're on their journey. I hear a lot of people criticize them and say, well, they're against the LGBTQ community. And that's true. They have come out. He has come out and said some nasty things. But here's the thing. Everybody's recovery journey happens in stages. We don't let go of these. We don't let go of these ideas easily, particularly if we've been raised in them. Ah, yes. So, I'm sure he controls everything, including what's on your cell phone. He just wants to control it all. Sadly, he's not going to find that he will. I think that once the Josh thing is over with, and I don't even want to say what the Josh thing is, and I don't think it's going to play out well for Josh. I've said this again and again. Conviction rate of that particular branch of the government is 97%. They don't bust anybody until they have almost rock solid evidence. Almost nobody beats the rap. So I'm thinking that he may be going away to federal pound me in the rear end jail for quite some time. He can go away for 20, 30 years at this rate, because the things he's done carry a very high prison sentence with them most of the time. I take no pleasure in the fact that this has gone down and that he's going through this. But then again, I lay this directly at the feet of Jim Bob Duggar and the way that this family has mishandled teenage sexuality and the regular normal development. And you read through this document and how many times they brought up modesty of women. It's just mind-boggling. They spend so much time trying to police women's sexuality by controlling their clothing, their thoughts, everything. The dream police, the thought police. They really think that they can control every aspect of a woman's being, from thoughts to what they wear to to not having the ability to say no when someone wants some fun, sexy times. And I'm pretty sure they're not allowed to offer alternatives. And there are always alternatives and workarounds in just about everything except that particular religion. No birth control, have as many children as you can possibly squeeze out, even if it impacts your health and you die. I mean, that's the reality of it. When you look at the statistics of how many quiverful home birthing mothers die, it's actually pretty astounding. It's right up there with third world country deaths. It's a bad one. Now, I realize in the US, maternal deaths have risen tremendously in the last 20 years. We're going backwards, folks, not forward. And I think that things like home birth, when you don't have qualified attendance, tends to bring that higher. Not that I think, do you think he will plea or go trial? I think we're going to see a trial. I think that Josh is that particular kind of fundamentalist arrogance, and we've seen it. Look at the booking photo of him from this thing. He looks like he is so full of Xanax that he can barely sit up straight. But combined and beneath that likely Xanax dose he took, you can see the sheer arrogance in his smirk. I have always called that boy the smugger Duggar because he just always looks smug. He always has. One of the few times I saw him when he did not look smug is when I was in Alexandria, Virginia, for the signing of the Sisters book. You remember the book the four sisters wrote? Well, I went to a book signing at Family Christian Bookstore in Alexandria, Virginia. I stood in line for hours to get my books. I got several of them signed and turned around and sold them on eBay with the signatures, especially after I'd read one and done a review for NLQ. That was the only time I've ever seen Josh not smug. He came rushing in about an hour and a half after the book signing had started, but after the cameras were already gone, when the crew had already left. And he seemed like he was rattled and upset. It was just, he was rushing. He had made it there very late. The photo I have of Anna and him was snapped in that moment when he came in. He was sitting beside her and he was all freaking out. I wanted to catch a photo of them that way, well, of him. And I had a long conversation with Anna in that book line compared to everybody else. And I liked her. I liked her a lot. I hate to think about this going on in her life. I hate to think of the recovery time it's going to take her to recover from all of this if she walks away. And what will happen to her emotions if she doesn't walk away and she doubles down. I think Jessa has learned that she needs to have hospital births because Jessa, along with Jill, has had home births that have just gone sideways. You know, once that starts happening, you're way better off just going to the hospital. You know, I have friends who've done home birth. I thought about it myself with my last child. I could have, because I went into labor at like 9:30 in the morning, and by 1 o'clock I'd had her, and it was not any big deal, believe it or not. They didn't even have time to give me an epidural. So I could have easily have done that. And for some people, that's perfectly acceptable. But I would still like to see everybody doing that have a licensed, insured, educated midwife or greater helping. It just makes common sense. One of the things that we covered at NLQ right before I came on board, when I was a member of the message board for NLQ, one of the things that we covered that was really interesting to me was that Carrie Chmielewski birth, Benaya, I think was the name of her baby, who was born dead. That was a home birth that went horribly, horribly, horribly wrong. She had a blog called Carry Me Away. A lot of us read it. A lot of us liked her, even though she was clearly drinking the Kool-Aid is the only way to put it, I guess. She was doing the really hardcore fundamentalist Christian things. A lot of us watched her pregnancy all the way to the end and were very concerned and said, look, you need to go to the doctor, because at one point she gained a tremendous amount of her was way bigger than it should have been, and we were all worried. She went to an unlicensed midwife who said it was twins. The hospital she went to for an ultrasound said no, there were not twins, and she needed to consult a doctor. She ignored all of that, and did a home birth, started to do a home birth with the unlicensed midwife, who, by the way, had a track record of a pile of dead babies in several states. So this woman had a bad history. The outcome was that the woman had some type of preeclampsia. The baby was born dead, and she was in labor for a long time. They finally called the rescue squad. When she went into cardiac arrest, they brought her back, but they had to do a complete and total hysterectomy on her, and they couldn't save the baby. And it could have been prevented had she just taken normal health care, just going to the hospital, going to the doctor. It was a heartbreaking situation. I remember ranting on the phone to both Vicki Garrison, who ran NLQ at that time, and to a news reporter, that the midwife really needed to be held responsible for this death. Not the mother, the midwife, because the midwife should have seen this coming. There were all kinds of tests she'd run that did not look right, and she just said, oh no, you have twins, instead of truthfully, you're having eclampsia and you should have been seen. And that's the damage some of these religious midwives can do. They press people to do these things, and there's a pile of dead babies. And that's how I'm going to say it. I hate to say her name. God forgive me. Katie Joy. Katie Joy KJ joined a lot of these home birthing groups and started publicizing and shaming these women. That's the last thing they need. They don't need to be shamed. Carrie didn't need to be shamed. And she didn't know about Carrie, thank God. Carrie's dead now. She's passed on, but she was through hell. She said after all of this, she ended up leaving her husband and said that he was abusive to her. And now she's dead in a car accident. So there's no way to reach her and maybe do a post interview. I know her children, I've seen them post on social media. They've carried away a lot of trauma and hurt from what went down in the family. So you have these bloggers that are following these home birth groups, and they're just ragging these women or putting them down, where we should be reaching out to them with kindness and love and say, hey, you really need to see a doctor. You do. You need to see a doctor. I'm worried about you. I'm concerned for you and your baby, instead of ranting and pointing and saying these people have to be taken down. And I got off on a side ramble because of Jessa. Jessa is having a doctor, hospital delivery. At least we hope so. Well, we hope she consults at least. If she's going to do a home birth, she really needs somebody licensed. Somebody who knows what they're doing, who knows quickly the signs of when birth can go wrong. And that's the only problem I have with home birth, besides the fact that a lot of times there are people who are not qualified in any way, shape, or form. Birth can go wrong in a hurry. You can be in the hospital and still die because there's so many things that can go wrong. Reach out with love and support and not expose. That's exactly right. We've got to do that. Here, I know a lot of people that still do home birth. I know a family that did it last year with no complications and without a midwife, just a husband and wife. And I've seen people go to the beach here and give birth. It strikes me a little bit strange. You know, I swim in the ocean. I don't want to think about people giving birth out there. And I know there's some people that talk about dolphin guided birth. I think any weird birth thing you can come up with, you're going to come up with people that believe that and they do that. And as long as it's not illegal, we can't stop them from doing these horrible things. But I think we can influence them in love if we think they're going in the wrong way. And that's where the line has to be on all of this, I think. Even though I swear I'm snarking and making fun of Jim Bob Duggar for this questionnaire, maybe he had so many men lining up to court and marry his daughters, he felt he needed to have some criteria for scanning them out. I know that the McDonald's did that. Like I said, I think I heard the Maxwells did it. And there are a couple of other fundamentalist families that I know of and evangelical families that have come up with these lists that you have to meet all the criteria or you're going to get 86th out the door, no matter how suitable you might be for that girl. And that's the other thing that horrifies me about courtship and the whole evangelical model. It does not allow for things like chemistry and electricity. I don't know about those marriages. I do know that my parents came out of a Cajun culture, okay? They were put together by their parents. It was a marriage. It was brokered by the family. My father fell in love with my mother and was very in love with her. My mother was horrified by my father. And their entire 12-year marriage, well, how long were they married? It was longer than that. 15-year marriage. Their entire 15-year marriage was horrible. I could tell you horror stories about what I went through as a kid, living with the two of them and their marital fights. There was no chemistry there whatsoever. There was no electricity. There was no friendship. And that's really the big foundation that marriage must rest on. You got to be friends with each other. If there's no friendship underpinning the whole thing and some chemistry thrown in, you might as well just not get married in the first place. That crazy romantic love comes and goes and comes again. But the friendship needs to be there to carry you through the rough patches. It really does. And when you have these questionnaires and you have fathers picking out suitable husbands for the girls, you're going to get a lot of it wrong, because what may look like Mr. Right to your father is going to look very different to somebody else. I would hate to think of who my father would have picked out for me. Probably somebody from his Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey clown group. Oh my, that wouldn't have gone well. I don't like guys that wear more makeup than I, and I don't wear much makeup. B, that's understandable. I've heard of people having babies at home. I would have probably had my last one at home if we'd have been any slower about getting to the hospital. Did Josh fill out the questions for Anna's dad? I don't know why Anna's dad let Josh date and marry Anna. Monica, that is a really good question, and I don't have an answer for that. I'm thinking probably not. This is not something that's incredibly in quiverful theology. The only thing that I could think happening is, Josh and Anna met at Bill Gothard, one of the get-togethers they had, the yearly or every 6 months get-togethers where the homeschooling families all get together and intermingle. I think one of the important purposes that those meets serve is they allow women and men who are unmarried to meet and possibly decide that person is the one they want and set up courtships. So there have been courtships that have been canceled. I think Josh had at least one, maybe two that didn't come to fruition. One was with Jim Holt's daughter. Jim Holt, you have to remember, is the politician that Josh was working for, and he or volunteering for, and he caught Josh with prawns. I'm just going to say prawns, shrimps, prawns, whatever, on the campaign computer and canned his rear end, and then broke off the courtship. I could swear, but don't quote me, that there was another courtship after that, but I don't know who that was with. Hey, real. We're talking about the Duggars and putting people together to get married, and that crazy 432 question survey that it took me 4 days to read through and to talk about, because there was so much there. It was just so much. And I'm talking to my husband trying to twist his arm into reading it himself and then coming on here to tell us his views, because he's obviously got a very distinctly different view than I do. He never really got on board with our quiverful church. I used to be told all the time, we're going to let you do this ministry, this mission trip, this whatever that we normally would only allow married couples to do because their husband is not with the program. I was told that more times than you can count, to the point that when I left, they said, oh, you don't have to leave. Let him go to the Methodist church and you stay here. You just divorce him. That's the only time you'll ever hear them throw out the word divorce. If they think that you are with somebody who is not with your program, they'll tell you, kick him to the curb. They like to pretend they don't like divorce, but they do tend to bust it out for stupid things. Real, they still do that thing. They still do that thing. That whole survey was written as if it were given out just to the boys, just to the guys trying to date the girls, not to the girls trying to have courtship with the boys. It was a strictly girl thing. I imagine with the girls, the fathers get together and talk. And I think in most of these quiverful families where there isn't a questionnaire, that's what happens. The fathers talk to each the other person, and it just goes from there. It seems more natural to do that than to have a 432 questionnaire that keeps repeating itself. That was just the stupid of the stupid. And yeah, Rin, there's still arranged marriages in the U.S., quite a few places, especially in fundamentalism. Most of the time, those marriages are brokered between the fathers in some pockets of different ethnicities. I'm Cajun. Like I said, it was a thing when my parents got married, still in Cajun culture. It wasn't always how it happened, but it did happen in some ways. Oh, Gam, I'm sorry to hear that you lost power. We frequently lose power here because we're in a second world nation. They're trying to upgrade and become a first world nation. Part of that is upgrading the system. So we can sometimes go down for 20 minutes here, 30 minutes there. The electricity doesn't bother me. The one that bothers me is when we lose water, which is why we have like an 80-gallon water tank so we can flush the toilet. So in those days when they shut down the water supply to work on the pipes. So there is that. So you lost power. Did you have any other problems? Did you lose your roof or have any kind of wind damage? Sometimes there is chattel involved, B, and some fathers think that. Von Ullman was one of the ones that used to talk about women as chattel. Red beans and rice. So you're getting me started. I got beans in the kitchen. I can make red beans and rice. You just have to start them real soon to make it happen. Because as you well know, it's a multi-hour cooking process. And I make pretty good red beans. I like red beans and rice. I grew up eating that all the time when I was a kid. It's one of those things that I still do enjoy that I ate when I was a kid. You were joking. Sadly, it's some religions, some versions of quiverful think that women have no rights, that You go transferred from your father owning you to your husband owning you. My husband jokes about chattel. That's his big thing. You're my chattel. Like, no, I'm not. I'm not your chattel. Oh my gosh. And I'm pretty feisty, and he's always known that. Even when I was in that religion, I was feisty, even though I was not feisty enough then. Example, our pastor got up and gave a sermon one day about modesty. From the pulpit, he said he never wanted to see a sleeveless blouse or a skirt that did not fall halfway between your knee and your ankle. Why? Because he said there were women in the congregation that were making him lust, because he could see their slipped bra straps falling out of their sleeveless blouse. He could see their knees. He could see parts of their thighs. So our Pastor Pat, was going to Lust Town, and he did not like it. So he stood up and gave this real long sermon about it. None of us really, well, we finally did say something to him. But the ladies in the group, we all were like, what? Do you know what it's like to have menopause in a place where in the summer times it can get like here into the high 90s and have to wear a blouse with sleeves? We were all pretty much outraged about that. I mean, he ranted on and said you had on proper underwear and just all kinds of stuff. And that was my only real exposure to the whole modesty thing. Our church did not preach that. The pastor a couple of times went off on a rant about that, but it mostly was not a thing, thank goodness. 2 goats, a cow, and $1 from my door. Oh my goodness, B, I got a story to tell you. I got a funny one to tell you. And Gam, I'm glad you had no damage. Kenya in the 90s. And at the time I had disruptive hair. I'm just going to call it what it was. It was my small rebellion against the church I was in. I was starting to feel like I wasn't supposed to be there anymore. I used to color my hair back then because I wasn't ready to die. Do you remember when Cher had the song Life After Love? And she had her hair was purple and sort of red streak. That's how my hair was. I had waist-length hair, longer than it is now. And it was streaked like that. I'd paid quite a bit of money at the hairdresser to get this fancy do. And this was about 6 months before I saw Cher doing it. So Cher copied me. No, if I was very stuck on myself, I might say that, but she did not. I was just ahead of her on that. So I had that crazy hairdo. I went on this mission trip. And an African offered the pastor goats and sheep and cows for the woman with the magic hair. Because apparently they had never seen somebody with disruptive hair, dyed all these colors. And I'm surprised they didn't trade me because, like I said, even back then, I was not somebody who was going to sit down and be quiet all the time. And things that happened, like the whole thing with the modesty and not wearing sleeveless shirts, a bunch of us got together and talked to us ladies, saying, no, this is wrong. And they elected me to go talk to him. And I did and said, that's not happening. We're doing sleeveless blouses. They're not sinful. We're not distracting you with our slutty elbows. So you're going to have to get a hold of yourself, dude. And years later, when I was at the Methodist church, I got elected to tell the pastor a very unpleasant truth, too, by the group that I was part of. It wasn't quite as bad. They chose me, and they chose me on a night when I had just had those shots in your back. They do the shots if you're having back problems where they put a bunch of steroids in there and they have you flying for like 12 hours on whatever kind of drugs they give you. They elected me to tell the pastor of the Methodist church that he needed to stop giving announcements in the middle of our contemporary worship service because he was completely derailing it. Nobody would tell him. Everybody whispered about it. They pushed me to do it. And I said, I'm doing it. I'm full of drugs right now. I'll tell him. Oh, thank you, Gam Gam and BS. My hair is my hair. I don't know how to tell you that it grows any different. I'll just say this. I don't use any chemicals any longer. I don't use any kind of chemical anything. And my hair has showed that it likes the fact that I'm not. And that started because of the mast cell and it's continuing on. And I've talked over an hour. I got to get out there and close the main gates because all the guys are gone finally. Yay! Everything's fixed. The hot tub's running. I'll be able to use it tonight. Hopefully. They're trying to work with me to put the chemicals in there at a lower level so that I can tolerate being in the hot tub because I react to the chemicals in the hot tub and the pool sometimes. And when that happens, I have to just stay out. And I hate that. It breaks my heart if I don't get to swim. Oh, B, I tell you, that's the best thing you could do. I look at all these girls. They have these beautiful hairdos. They have these beautiful colors. I can't tell you. I'd dye my whole head turquoise if I could. It's literally my favorite color. But at the end of the day, I know that the price I would pay in illness would not match it. And like I said before, that's really what I'm at without a crystal ball, because she made me physically much more ill when she pushed me to come on her stream. I double medicated. I knew I was going to pay the price with ill health for the days afterwards. And then she stood me up. You'd think that somebody who is raising a child that has chronic illnesses would know you cannot do that to someone with chronic illnesses. If that person goes out of their way to try to help you, and in those days I did try to help her, you don't stab them in the back like that. You don't make them sicker and then do that. You just don't. It does. And I got to get off because here I'm starting to talk about her, and I try not to ever talk about her. Because at this point, I just want her to disappear from my life. It's just too much. So now we've been through the document. There may be a scream tomorrow with my husband telling me what he thinks about all those crazy, crazy questions. B, what were we going to discuss? The thing we discussed today, the Duggars. Because her and I both had Duggar insider information. Like I said, I've met the Duggars. I've formed my own opinion of them since when I met them. One of the things I did notice that we've talked about sometimes in NLQ that Jim Bob and Michelle's relationship, I'm convinced that she calls the shots in many ways. I saw her behavior towards him. I saw his behavior towards her in the bookstore. Just based on that little slice of time, I saw happening what I've seen happen in Quiverful so many times when women turn to Quiverful to change their man, and they are the puppet masters behind the scene. Out in public, they're all meek and mild, and whatever you would like to do, my dear, is fine with me. It's so fine with me. Like Michelle, but later they're working the switches behind the scenes while pretending that up front. B, she is so fake. She's so fake. It's unbelievable. I think she controls him. That's my opinion, because I don't even think Jim Bob was in that fundamentalist and quiverful of a religion until he was married to her. And the reality with Quiverful in marriages that I've seen is most of the time it's the woman that drives the family into Quiverful, even though it ends up usually giving her a nervous breakdown. If you're stuck in a bad marriage and you believe that you should never divorce, no divorce, then what are you to do? The best thing you can do is to control your husband using God. So Quiverful throws the onus to change God and make your marriage great on God. All you got to do is pray right, live right, raise your children right, keep your house immaculate, all of those things. So they throw that onus on God to change the husband, and it's mostly unhappy marriages that I've seen. And then they go all fake happy, and behind the scenes, there's a lot of, would you pray for my husband? He's struggling with the besetting sin of pride, envy, sloth, whatever. And you get a really good sense of how incredibly fake some of these people are if you live in this world long enough. So anyway, I'm really going to go this time. I know I said I was going to go, and then I keep rattling on about the Duggars. So that's what I was going to discuss with her. That's what we were going to discuss. I was really going to talk about the fakery of the marriages in Quiverful and how that women always drive the men in. Okay, see you later. Maybe tomorrow.